Hey everybody, Chris here. It's been a long time since I've done one of these videos, really long time actually. I think the last time I did one of these videos was probably like a few months ago, some short one. I was opening up an album I got in the mail that I ordered on Amazon. It was a spur of the moment kind of thing. And I have done a few of these videos, but not for a long time. We're talking like year and a half, 2 years ago was the last time I did these. But because I'm not a video person. I'm not a person that likes to be on camera that really craves attention in terms of putting myself on camera. I rather just, either talk into a microphone where nobody sees my face on the radio, or I'm on social media. That's really those are the platforms that I enjoy doing because you don't see my face and I don't talk on camera. It's not really my thing, but I'm here doing this anyway just because I felt like it's good to do one video every now and then. And I'm not going to make a lot of details in terms of editing or anything like that. Just a simple record and upload. It doesn't take that much time. So that's what I'm going to do. And with this video, I'm going to, because I was thinking about Brad Paisley's new single. And Brad is one of my all-time favorite artists. His career started back in the late 90s. He's one of the most talented country artists we've had in probably the past 30, 40 years. He's that talented. As a songwriter, as a singer, as a guitar player, as a producer, he can do it all. He's one of the very few artists that can do literally everything when it comes to making music. But his new single, Bucked Off, had a high debut on the Billboard chart and then it fell off. And now it's slowly working its way back up. I don't think it's going to end up hitting anything beyond top 30, maybe. Maybe he can work back up there if his label, Sony Music Nashville, puts enough gumption in it. But Brad is in the same boat as Rascal Flatts, where Rascal Flatts has a song right now in the top 40 that's going up very slowly. Who knows where Back to Life is going to come, or like where it's going to peak at? I have no idea. My best guess would be again 20s maybe at tops. Maybe it's dies in the 30s where it is now. But Brad and Rascal Flatts are joining artists like Gary Allan, artists like Craig Morgan, artists like George Strait, Alan Jackson, Reba McEntire. These artists that have been pushed aside by radio, and I've talked about this a few times on Twitter, at my Twitter handle at PhilSaber, to people that because it is kind of hard to wrap your mind around, and it's not just country music. In pretty much every genre of music, artists get faded. Artists get faded out. I mean, it might take 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, whatever it is. Artists will get faded out eventually. It doesn't matter who you are. We saw George Strait finally, radio came to a consensus essentially after I Got a Car peaked at the top 20. That was it. George was pretty much done. I mean, you might have said George was done before that, though. And then there was that push to get him the record with Give It All We Got Tonight back in 2013 to get the #1 record. And then I Got a Car was released 2 singles later, top 20, and that was pretty much it for George in terms of getting hits at radio. And George's career lasted, God, 34 years, 35 years of radio, which is unheard of. That is an outlier. That is the outlier of outliers. Tim McGraw and Kenny Chesney are the two ones that we still see getting hits now at radio, and they've been going at it since the early to mid 90s. We're talking 25 years. 25 years is really long. I'm starting to see kinks in the armor though when it comes to Tim and Kenny, especially Tim. I personally don't think his new lead single was the choice I would have made for a lead single. I don't think Neon Church is going to be anywhere near impactful as some of his past lead singles. I don't think it was a good choice at all to release to radio, but Tim's still going at it, so is Kenny. But when you have artists that are legendary artists, it's hard to wrap a mind around just why radio would let go of these artists. There's a couple reasons. One is because believe it or not, there is a new generation of country radio listeners and fans of country music that are anywhere from their early teens all the way to like their mid to late 20s. And unfortunately, for people that love, people like Brad Paisley and Alan Jackson and Rascal Flatts, Gary Allan, Nug, Reba McEntire, go down the list. Those aren't the artists they grew up with. That generation, that 10 to 20 year window, they're growing up with artists like Old Dominion and Thomas Rhett and Luke Bryan. Blake Shelton, even though Blake's been around a long time as well. But those are the artists they're growing up with. They're not growing up with those, artists. Those artists were, people like my age, where I'm 29, mid to late 90s to the mid to late 2000s. That was like the wheelhouse of, in terms of shaping what kind of country music you prefer. And I'm a guy that loves the 90s and the early to mid 2000s. That's my wheelhouse for sure. Speaking of wheelhouse, that was a Brad Paisley album. I do not do puns. I know. I'm pretty good at it though, right? No, I'm not. But yeah. Um, but I don't think just because you aren't successful anymore at radio, like Brad Paisley, Rascal Flatts, their careers are now pretty much winding down in radio. George Strait, Alan Jackson, Reba McEntire, Vince Gill, they're pretty much done at radio. But all those artists I just mentioned, they're still on major labels. Alan Jackson's still on UMG Nashville. Vince Gill, Gary Allen, Shania Twain is still on Universal Music Group Nashville. Dolly Parton is still affiliated with Sony Music Nashville. Brad is still obviously. Tim is on there now. You look at artists like Kenny Rogers, Randy Travis, they're still with Warner Music Nashville, technically. They're not releasing any music really, but they're still under that label affiliation. They aren't going anywhere. And when and you go to Big Machine Label Group, Ronnie Dunn, Hank Williams Jr., Reba McEntire, they're still under that platform. They used to be with Nash Icon, where they would get play on Cumulus radio stations through like a joint venture deal. But all those artists I mentioned, they're still on major labels. Believe it or not, they haven't gone anywhere in terms of leaving the major label scene. They're just not really releasing any music to get mainstream airplay at radio. And to me, that's fine. It sucks that people like Brad Paisley, Rascal Flatts careers are done at radio because personally, I would like to see it go a little bit longer. But unfortunately, the main interest right now in terms of sales, streaming, because we are in that world now, it's going more towards artists like Thomas Rhett, Old Dominion. Those are the artists that are really popular right now with radio. Luke Combs. I mean, Luke Combs is the one where he's not as poppy as the other artists, yet he's probably been the most successful artist we've ever seen for a debut album. 4 straight number ones. It will be 5 straight number ones because Beautiful Crazy will go number one. I guarantee it. But those are the artists that are hidden right now, and there just isn't as much artists in terms of iTunes, Spotify, this whole new generation of music listeners with Brad and Rascal Flatts. They're just not artists for that platform. They didn't come into that platform. They're artists that were, where they first came in, radio was pretty much, it. There was no YouTube, there was no iTunes, there was no Spotify, Pandora, there was none of that stuff. So I think that's part of it. And then obviously, as you slowly decline your radio success, you're not played as much on the radio, and that affects, people hearing you. And it's my dog, by the way, Odessa. Say hi. I know. He's wondering what I'm doing because, again, I don't do this very often. So I'm trying to keep it under 10 minutes. So I've only got 2 minutes left. And personally, going back to being okay with it, it sucks again, but I'm content with it as long as these artists keep making music. Because again, even though that side, where you say, wow, those artists didn't grow up with, like all these different platforms and they aren't growing up this generation and being played on the radio, at the same time, because we are now in this generation, they can still release music at will to all these different platforms. You can still get it, like that, the drop of a hat, even though they're not in mainstream radio. Mainstream radio is the profession I work in. I still have love for radio. I love it to pieces. But we're now in the day and age, 2019, where it's not just radio. You can get your music anywhere. Artists can release songs independently now, and a lot of people hear them. I mean, you have a new artist like Riley Green. He was releasing stuff himself in the Southeast for a few years, and he had a huge fan base before he even got to mainstream radio. And there's been tons of artists like that. You can just go down the line for artists that have that kind of backstory. So luckily, we are now in a day and age where you don't have to be on the radio for people to notice you. And Brad Paisley, Rascal Flatts, Alan Jackson, George Strait, Reba McEntire, Vince Gill, they still have millions of fans out there that will go to their concerts, that will buy their albums, that will stream and buy their songs. So even though they're not mainstream radio anymore, it doesn't have to be all bad news. Personally, one of my all-time favorite artists, if not my all-time favorite artist, is Gary Allen. Gary, for some reason, I don't know why, the powers that be at his record label think it was a great idea to hold out on not releasing his album until they got a radio hit, even though I think the writing was pretty much on the wall that radio wasn't going to give him another hit, and they should have just released the album, and he went 4 singles and no album, which is pretty absurd if you ask me, but that's a story for another day. But yeah, I think that it's horrible, but it's understandable why certain, legendary artists that have been on radio for years get pushed aside for a new generation of artists, but it doesn't have to be that way to get mad about it, because again, we're in the day and age where you can consume that music at will. multiple platforms, and they have the will to release them. And that's why labels are keeping these artists around, because they know they have millions of fans out there still. They're not really radio artists anymore in terms of mainstream radio, but it'd be foolish to get rid of people like Brad Paisley and Rascal Flatts and Alan Jackson and George Strait and Gary Allen and Reba McEntire. It'd be foolish to not have them on some kind of major label. Because why wouldn't you want to have that in your back pocket? Yeah, you got great mainstream artists out there. You got, hey, look, we got Sam Hunt, Old Dominion, Thomas Rhett, Dustin Lynch and Luke Bryan, and all these great new artists coming out, which is having us go towards radio. But you also need artists that are not on radio nowadays. I think it's great to give resources to artists that aren't radio, to give resources to artists that aren't radio artists anymore. That's why you have, case in point, look at Chris Stapleton. It's not really an artist-to-artist thing, but Chris Stapleton's label, UMG Nashville, made a conscious effort when his Traveler CD came out, where they're going to release different songs to different platforms and market it towards that. Where they release a song like Nobody to Blame, that was a mainstream terrestrial radio single. That is what that song was made for. We're going to push it towards there. A song like Fire Away, Sirius XM. That's where it's going to make its heyday. That's where it's going to make all its headway, and it's going to gain lots of fans through that platform. And we'll focus on that platform with that song. You go to Spotify, and it's Tennessee Whiskey. Tennessee Whiskey was never a radio single, but it might as well have been because it sold like it, because they marketed, and word of mouth got out through Spotify and iTunes, and that's how that song exploded. So when you focus, and I think more artists are going to do that too, where you have an album and you have an artist that has an interest, you don't have to release only 2, 3, 4 singles to to mainstream radio and that's it. We're done. We're moving on. You can release it to different platforms and it's going to work, and I think it's going to help grow your artist. I mean, 2019, we have so many platforms. Why not utilize it? Think outside the box. And I think as traditional as Chris Stapleton is compared to a lot of country artists nowadays, his label and the tactics they're using is actually very cutting edge and extremely smart and creative. So that's a little off topic, but I thought it was something worth pointing out. But just wanted to touch on those legendary artists that a lot of us grew up with that aren't getting mainstream airplay anymore. But you know what? It's not the end of the world. I think they're going to be good. It's going to be okay in the long run. And who knows, Brad and Rascal Flatts might get 1 or 2, maybe 3 hits somewhere down the line. It's not out of the question. I mean, it's a long time ago, but Kenny Rogers came back and had a big #1 hit with Buy Me a Rose in 2000 when he was in his 60s, or 60 or late 50s. He was up there, so it's not out of the question that, Brad and Rascal Flatts, who are only in their 40s, I think early 40s, that they can still get a couple hits at radio yet. But thanks for viewing. Make sure to check out Grady's channel, Grady Smith. He's a great follow, in my personal opinion, the best video maker out there. That's kind of his thing. It's not my thing, but it's definitely his, and you should always give his videos a check, because he's one of the smartest people I know, and he's doing country music / country radio a lot of good, because he's shedding light on stuff that needs light shedded on. And he's not just following trends, he's doing it himself. He did the work. His last video about the snap tracks, that's all him. He totally did the work on that, and it took a lot of effort and a lot of research, and he did it. So those are the people that definitely need the attention, because he deserves it. But I'm at Phil Saber. Most of my stuff is on Twitter. I'm not going to do these videos very often. This is a very special thing. Maybe I'll do one again soon, but who knows. But thanks for listening, and thanks for watching, everyone.